Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is John McDougall, and I am the event coordinator here at Murder by the Book in Houston. And before I get us started tonight, I just wanted to make a couple of quick announcements, let everybody know what is going on at the store as everyone gets the notification that we've gone live and comes and finds us from the various corners of the internet. First up, we are so excited. We're actually hosting some in-store events again. So if you look at the calendar on murderbooks.com, you'll see that our events are going to be listed either as virtual or in-store. For the in-store ones, we are requiring masks, which is just something we've told authors and publishers that we would do. As you guys know, if you've been in the store, you'll know that the seating area is not the biggest in the world. So we want to just make sure everybody feels comfortable. But it's been so great to slowly start getting some stuff on the books again. We're going to keep doing virtual stuff for a while. I think it's going to be hybrid for a bit. We are trying to figure out what it would look like to potentially broadcast some of the in-store stuff. But we're not there just yet at the moment. We're still kind of reveling in the fact that we get to have some authors in store and just kind of focusing on that. But we're so excited for tonight's virtual event. We were just chatting before we went live. Simone St. James is actually one of the authors that we were lucky enough to get to host in 2020. She was able to come sign at Murder by the Book when the last book came out. So we were super excited to get to see her then. But we're so excited tonight to also talk about her newest release, the Book of Cold Cases. So I wanted to mention that we do have signed book plates. So if you order a copy of it, you will get a signed book plate to go with it. And I feel like there was something else I was going to say, but I don't know what it was. So we've got signed book plates. I will drop a link to where you can order from the website in the comments there. And so I'm going to get us started. I'm going to start with Simone and bring her out first. How are you tonight, Simone?
Hi, everybody. Hi, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Happy release day.
Thank you very much.
As everyone knows who's watching, or you might not know watching if you've never been to the store before, we're all huge fans. We've been huge fans since The Haunting of Maddie Clare came out. And like I said, we were so lucky to get to see Simone in store 2 years ago, and we've hosted her a couple of times. But her new book just came out today. It is the Book of Cold Cases. So if you were unfamiliar, Simone St. James is the New York Times bestselling author of The Sundown Motel and The Broken Girls. She spent 20 years behind the scenes in the television business before leaving to write full-time. And we're excited tonight to have Isabel Cañas with us. She's going to be leading the conversation. She's got a new book called The Hacienda, which is going to be out May 3rd. I'm super excited. I just got my galley of it a couple of days ago, so I can't wait to dive into it. So we're going to bring...
I've read it. You're going to love it. It's so
okay. How are you tonight, Isabel?
I'm doing great. How are you, John?
I'm good. It's so good to meet you. Thanks for doing this with us tonight.
It is my pleasure. I'm so excited.
Awesome. So Isabel is a Mexican-American speculative fiction writer. After having lived in Mexico, Scotland, Egypt, and Turkey, among other places, she is settled for now in New York City, where she works on her PhD dissertation in medieval Islamic literature and writes fiction inspired by her research and her heritage. So tonight, while Simone and Isabel are chatting, if you guys have questions for either of them about upcoming books, current books, writing process, any of that stuff, please post those in the comments on Facebook and the live chat on YouTube, and we will get to those in a little bit. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to Isabel and Simone to let them chat, and I will see y'all in just a little bit.
All right.
Hi.
Hi, I am so excited. As I was telling you before we went live, I absolutely adored the Book of Cold Cases, and I was so sucked into it that my husband got jealous and he stole it from me. So I have to make sure I don't lose his spot as we were chatting about it, and I grab it and gesture with it. But to start off, another thing that we mentioned briefly before we went live was the way that you blend genre in your work. And this book in particular is a delicious blend of thriller and supernatural horror. And so when I was reading it, I was curious about how the idea for this particular novel came to you, and whether like one genre came more forcefully to the fore when you came up with the idea. Like, did you have the idea for a thriller first and the haunting second, or did it all come together naturally? I'm really interested in how of the genesis of this book, really.
I guess the original very, very beginning idea came from my love of true crime and my obsession with true crime. And so I kind of, we see a few of them, but not very many, but I kind of love the idea of like a true crime novel where it's like, it reads like a true crime story, but it's not, which means that I get to make up the ending, any ending that I think sounds good to me. So it's like I get to divorce it from reality that way. So I kind of like the idea of writing my own true crime story. And I was inspired a little bit by the Zodiac case, which is an infamous true crime case. There was a man in the San Francisco area in the late 60s and early 70s, and he went around just murdering random people, completely random people, and mailing letters to the newspapers that had ciphers in them. And he was never caught. No one was ever arrested. It was never solved. It's an eternal mystery at this point. And so I was kind of inspired by that. And I thought, like, well, what if you had a Zodiac type case, but your main suspect was a woman? And I realized that when you do that, you're not just doing a simple little flip. It changes everything about that story. It changes who the suspect is. Why would she be doing this? Like, you know, we think of a lone, you know, crazy man doing it, and that's kind of a picture we have in our head. But why would a woman be doing this? And how is it written about in the newspapers? How is it prosecuted? How is it investigated? How is it prosecuted in the courts? So everything changes about it, and the whole dynamic changes. So I started with that kernel. I really wanted to do a deep dive into that. And then I added the supernatural stuff comes to me because I like adding that extra layer that's kind of mirroring what's happening psychologically with the characters and with their journey and with their arc. I mean, I love to put the supernatural stuff in, but I always put it in specifically as a mirror to the characters. So the things that they're not letting go of are actually manifested. You know, the things that haunt them are manifested. And I love to just add that extra layer that just sort of creeps you out, like these things that have happened to these characters are actually physically kind of still there, and they have to be dealt with. And that's I have a lot of fun with that in all of my books. So I just added that in, as I always do.
It was enormously fun to read. And you said that you put in the supernatural element and you have it like psychologically mirror what the character is dealing with. As I was reading it, or rather, as I was reflecting on the book after I read it, I noticed that and I was like, damn, that is so good. I loved it. It was very deftly done. No spoilers. But I found the ending enormously satisfying because of that thread that ran through it. But speaking of the haunting, I had a question about the house, the Greer Manor. Old haunted houses fascinate me, which should surprise no one, given my book is about a haunted house. And so I was curious. I absolutely loved the setting, first of all. The spooky, rainy Oregon weather was so atmospheric and so like cool and chilly, and I loved it. But I was curious about whether or not the Greer Mansion was based on any houses that you have encountered in the past, and what drew you to the idea. Actually, no, you've actually answered that question already. For those who don't know, I have like a million questions ready for Simone because I love this book to pieces. So
yeah, you emailed them to me.
Oh my god, guys, there were like 85.
Well, I just read them very briefly because I like to just go off the top of my head. But I read them over and I was like, okay, I can answer these.
You've got this. As long as I don't go like boom, boom, boom all at once. So is the Greer Mansion based on any house that you've encountered in the past? Or is it completely made up? Because the details were so vivid.
Oh, it's made up.
I loved it.
I've this is my eighth ghost story. So when you've written enough ghost stories, you know, you have to try and change things up a little bit. Like you're trying to come up with different ways to do it. And I kind of enjoyed the idea of a haunted, like mid-century modern house, which is not something we've really seen before. It's not like this ancient Victorian Gothic thing. It's a Gothic story, but it's set in this mid-century modern house. And it's the actual mid-century modern architecture, which I love mid-century modern a lot, but it's kind of easy to see it as a little bit creepy. Like mid-century modern houses have those huge floor-to-ceiling windows and a big long bank. And I think that living in that would be super weird. And I put it in the book. They have this house and with this giant bank of windows, and they always keep the curtains closed because they can't stand looking out. So I kind of layered a lot of that stuff in there. And of course, the mid-century modern house, this isn't like mid-century modern furniture that you'd buy now. It's actually original furniture from the 50s and the 60s. And it's still sitting there. Yeah, it's still sitting there, and the magazines are still there, and the ashtrays are still there, and those weird colors in the kitchen, and all the beige, all the burnt orange and cream and all that stuff. So I just like the idea of that house being the original, like mid-century modern, and it's just been sitting there the whole time. And I found that kind of delightful to add to that, make it a little bit different from the usual creepy setting.
It was great because I agree with you. When you look at it like a mid-century modern house, my next door neighbor when I was in high school, his mom had a mid-century modern house, and you look at it from just a slightly different angle, and it's so eerie. And I loved y'all pay attention to that ashtray, because there are some details in this book that just blew me away when I got to the end. But the details in the house gave it such like a grounded eeriness that I wasn't expecting from a mid-century modern, and that I just loved. So chapeau, I absolutely love that. So you said this is your 8th ghost story. I have a two-sided question here.
Yeah.
Do you believe in ghosts?
Uh-huh.
And if not, what draws you to write about them? What do they mean to you?
Well, I have not specifically had a ghost encounter. I've never seen one or encountered one, but I think they're possible. And I think that almost anything is possible. So a lot of what I write is about what's possible, like, is it possible that that thing that you thought you saw, you actually saw? Is that possible? Is it possible that window wasn't open when you left the room? So I kind of enjoy that sort of twilight in between stage, where you think maybe, but you're not sure. And what if it is? And that's a lot of fun to explore. And that's a lot of fun to explore. I mean, it's not a spoiler. I mean, this house is absolutely haunted. I mean, it's not, and some authors like to play with the idea of, oh, is this person like actually losing their mind and making it up? And I'm always like, no.
Yeah. Give me the ghost.
This is a ghost. Maybe this person does think they're crazy, but there is no question. This is a very haunted place.
Extremely freaking haunted, guys. Be prepared.
Yeah, it always is for my books. I have not yet written a setting where it's like, it was like a Scooby-Doo thing. It's not really haunted. It's always haunted. It's super haunted. So I do enjoy that character journey into like, did I see that? Did that happen? And different characters will have different reactions. Some of them are, some of them will disbelieve, some of them are wondering. And then I write the occasional character who's like, oh, that was a ghost. So, okay.
All right. What's happening. Moving on.
And it's fun to just write all different people on that spectrum.
Well, you've actually given me the perfect segue to start talking about the two main characters in this novel, Beth and Shay. And the way that they both deal with the world, because these are two extremely different women, or are they? But where I would like to start. So when you were talking about true crime, and talking about how you wanted to take a serial killer case like that of the Zodiac Killer and have the serial killer be a woman, and how that wasn't just like a swap in, swap out, oh, she's wearing a dress now.
Right.
And lipstick. No, the gendered aspect of flipping it changes so much about the suspect, the way the case is handled, the press coverage. Mm-hmm. What we have here in Beth in this novel is what, from the outside, is very easy to label, and I use heavy air quotes here, because I don't believe in unlikable characters, but she's very much, she and Shay both come off as unlikable characters from the get-go. Mm-hmm. Is this something that you thought about as you were writing? Is it something, reading it, I'm pretty sure you weren't worried about it, because you were very unapologetic about who these women were, and and how you embraced those characters, and I loved it. But I was just curious, approaching writing these women, what was it like?
Well, I like both of them. As an author, I like almost all of my characters. And I think that's what comes through. Now, that's not the same as saying they're perfect people. That is not remotely the same thing. I like them. I find Beth funny. And what she
So
is. And so one of the things I loved playing around with the character of Beth. Beth was a blast to write, because she is like, she just doesn't care she has never cared what anyone thinks about her, literally ever. Like, not one person. She has never cared. And so it was fun to just be that person while I was writing.
Incredible.
And she kind of says things a little bit bluntly. She does not care what you think about what
This
she
lady
says.
does not beat around the bush.
I know.
And the dialogue, and we went there.
Yeah, and it's possible that she's maybe a sociopath. She's never been examined, but she's like, doesn't even care about whether or not she's a sociopath. She's never cared. So that was a lot of fun to write. So on the one hand, yes, if you were dealing with that person in everyday life, you would not like that person very much. But to read about it in a book, and she's a villain character.
Yeah.
But what is fun to write about villains is when you have a villain who has some really attractive traits to them.
Yeah.
They're good looking and they're funny and they're a little bit caustic and they've got a wit to them. And you're like, I'm supposed to hate that this person is quite possibly a murderer, like a serial murderer, but I like this person. So that's a lot of fun to just twist around all that. Yeah. Yeah. And Shay, my heroines are always like, I always write about women that I would personally like to spend time with if they existed, because it takes me a long time to write a book. So I actually have to spend a lot of time with my heroine.
Amen. Amen.
It is purely a selfish thing for me. I'm like, I can't spend 2 years with this person. I can't do it. So I write people, and again, not the same as being a perfect person. She's very stuck in her life, but she has good reason for being stuck. And, there's going to be some stuff happening in this book that's going to push her out of her comfort zone. So you get to watch her become a little bit unstuck. And so I just enjoyed writing that arc. Like, the beginning of the book is not her final form. She's going to become something else, and you're going to get to watch her do it.
I adored her. I read her. It's so interesting because at the beginning of the book, she lives a life that's very ruled by fear. And her journey is about stepping into her agency. And it was so empowering. And I think what I loved most about it was that her biggest obsession, her most obsessive quality, and I think especially with women, sometimes having weird obsessions can be looked down upon. And she is so into true crime, and it becomes her superpower in a way. That is what enables her to grow, is that obsession. And it pushes her both psychologically, it pushes the character through this immense arc. And I love that. So I was curious about, you've said that true crime can provide like catharsis and serve as an outlet for women with anxiety. And were you intentionally writing that into Shay's journey?
Oh, absolutely. She is using true crime as a way to process something that happened to her. And to a certain extent, it's kind of a healthy thing, but then she goes past the line where maybe it's not really serving her. But at the same time, like, I intentionally set it up like she has a day job and her true crime blog is her nighttime thing. So the thing that she's truly, truly passionate about in life is not the thing that she's made central to her life. She's, like you say, like she's told herself, I'm not allowed to like this. I'm not allowed to be really excited about it. I'm not allowed to find it really exciting. So there's something wrong with me for liking it. So it's a sideline that I do. This is only a sideline. And meanwhile, like, underneath it all, it's the thing that she truly loves. So that's the start of the story. She's kind of arranged her life where she has not taken the thing she loved and put it front and center and said, I love this, and I don't care if somebody disapproves or somebody thinks it's weird. So that's where she starts the story. And in a weird way, Beth helps her kind of just own her weirdness, because Beth doesn't care about anything that anybody thinks about her. So in a way, Shay that rubs off on Shay a little bit.
It's great. I loved reading the relationship between these two women and seeing how Shay grew because of it.
Even though Beth is a murderer,
question mark,
So
Has to read it.
it's weird. It was a fun dynamic. It was a really deep dynamic where it's like
she has loving people in her life. Like, yeah, her parents are in the picture, but her sister Esther like cares a lot about her and is like, hey, come here. Let me set you up with this nice guy from my husband's work. I want you to be a part of my life. You know, you help me out in a tough time. Let me help you. But it's Beth who provides that catalyst for growth. Oh,
yeah.
Loved it. Loved it. But speaking of true crime and obsessions, I'm curious, when did you start getting into true crime?
I've always had an interest in it. And I spent, I think there's a lot of discussion about the big popularity wave of true crime in the last maybe 10 years. My theory is that it's not really a popularity wave. It's that we've all just decided we're allowed to talk about it and we don't care what anybody thinks. And if it doesn't interest you, just move on, just move past, go talk about what interests you.
Leave me with my podcasts. And
whatever interests you, you go talk about that. And this is what we like. So I think that there's just like it's mirrored in the book. I mean, I just think there's become more of a societal acceptance where you can just talk about this stuff and anyone who doesn't like it can just tune out. And so I've always enjoyed it, but I haven't always been front and center about it. I haven't always written about it. And since this wave in the past 10 years, I've been saying to myself, this does really interest me. And I'm just going to listen to these podcasts and I'm going to read these books. Like, why am I judging myself? Like, there's not even anyone judging me. So why would I just judge myself sitting alone in a room? Like, that doesn't make any sense. So I guess maybe it's I've always been interested in it, but the last, 10 years or so, I've just decided that this, and I've consumed so much of it that I've gotten story ideas from it, which is where the books come from.
Fantastic. So, my aunt, whom I adore, and one of my cousins are true crime fiends. And so I have to ask you, do you have a recommendation for a true crime podcast that you've been enjoying lately?
Well, I mean, I am a big fan of My Favorite Murder. My Favorite Murder is true crime and comedy, which is some people, that doesn't work for everybody. Like, some of us love it. If you don't love it, you can find other things.
My family's big on the Black humor. So.
Yes, it's very Black humor, and it can, it rubs some people the wrong way. But if you want to go the other end of the spectrum, I always recommend, there's a podcast out of Australia called Case File.
I've not
Case
heard
File is so good. It is so good. And like, it is the opposite of My Favorite Murder, any of the comedy podcasts. The host is actually anonymous. We don't even know what his name is. And there is no banter. There's no chit chat. There's no blah, blah, blah. And it is intensely researched. Some of the stories are intensely upsetting, but so well done because the way they present it, it is just straight facts, well-researched facts, and like very compelling. So there's kind of two ends of the spectrum there, and it depends on my mood. I listen to both of them. Case File is like hundreds of episodes. It is amazing.
Oh, I'm so excited to dig into this. I was when you were chatting, you said you've been interested in true crime for a long time, and this new wave of intense, like, I guess, societal interest in the popularity of true crime has kind of blossomed. You thought, hey, why don't I embrace this? The question that occurred to me as you were saying that was, why now for this book? I believe you wrote the first draft right before the pandemic hit.
I think I started it in 2018 and 2019.
And were you revising it into that weird early pandemic?
Oh, I revised it all pandemic.
Oh my God. What was that like? What changed in your writing life when it came to the pandemic? I feel like this is something we get asked all the time, but a lot did change.
Yeah. It was like with everybody else, like it just became so hard to focus.
Yeah.
Like, writing requires sitting in silence with very, very sustained, deep focus, like
deep
work. And deep work became so impossible for like, I don't even know how long, a really long time. So I had to take my work in very small chunks and like be like, okay, 20, like a timer, like 20 minutes. I'm shutting everything down off my laptop, 20 minutes, and I'm doing, whatever. So that became very hard. Creativity just became really, really, really hard for all of us for a good year plus. Burnout became a real thing, as it was with like almost everybody in the planet is burned out right now.
So
no matter what job you do.
no matter what you do, we are all fried.
Yeah, everybody's fried.
Yeah. This is a question I love to ask my friends who are writers, because it's not something that happens often to me, but when it does, it's like, whoa, were there parts of this novel that surprised you while you were writing it? Anything that cropped up that you hadn't planned? Are you a big planner? You write thrillers, so do you know the ending before you begin? Do you plot it very carefully? Because there's some tidbits
you
kind of like, whoa, this is my mind. This happened. Like, I'll let you talk.
You kind of have to know the overall arc, like where everything's going to end up.
Yeah.
Because otherwise your publisher won't let you write it. Because if your idea for how it ends up is terrible and you get all the way to the end of the book, your publisher's going to be like, you have to redo it. So they want you to, when you start, to just give them like 2 pages where you're like, it doesn't have to be a chapter by chapter, but it's like, it kind of ends here. These people, maybe these characters die, these don't die. This is kind of the answer to the mystery. They kind of want to see that. And I kind of want to know that when I go in. So I know very broad strokes. I know what the answer to the mystery is. And, but other than that, I mean, and I know before I get started, I know the characters, like they're just in my head. They're talking in my head. So I've kind of nailed them down. And so when I get into the writing, I still get surprised by a lot of stuff. I don't do a detailed chapter by chapter outline. This book, this book surprised me a lot because the structure was very challenging, like how to tell this particular story in a way that made sense and where you're delivering the right facts at the right time. And so there was a lot of revising in this book. There's a lot of revising in every book, but this book was more revising than usual because it was like that first draft was like, I mean, it was terrible. And it was nothing like the book you're reading right now. So I had to fix so much stuff. Like I just had so much junk in there. So, because I was kind of working my way through plot problems on the page, and like no reader wants to read that. Yeah. So there was a lot for that. But it did surprise me. Actually, you mentioned one of the things that surprised me when I wrote it was Shay's relationship with her sister.
Really?
I wrote it in there. I was like, I think, I want to see Shay sort of what her personal life is like outside of like work and this obsession. And I just wrote in this scene where the sister says, come for dinner. And I was like, what is this like when she goes to her, what is this character like when she goes to see her sister for dinner? And I wrote that scene, and like all that really lovely sort of subtext between those two sisters, that just came out as I wrote. And so I was like, that's what her relationship with her sister is like, like it's kind of complicated and they got a history, but they love each other a lot. And they're trying to figure out how to be there for each other as grown women who have other things going on in their lives and limited time. So that scene surprised me when I wrote it because I wasn't sure.
Beautiful part of the book. It's just it's almost like you think in a book like this that is full of, grisly murders, investigation, ghosts, really creepy hauntings. By the way, I was laying in bed at night after I started reading this novel being like, oh my God, I have to complain to Simone about this because am I going to be able to sleep tonight? But it's something that like it might be like the contrast between like Shay's obsession and that really loving relationship, even though it has its difficulties. It gave Shay this grounding that if it hadn't been there, I don't know if she would have been the same to me as a reader, but I loved it. It was fantastic.
Yeah. And that's like, and writers can get a little bit weird about their characters and they're like, the characters are speaking to me. And I don't really see it that way when I write, but that was something like I had spent at that point so long with that character in my mind and I had come up with and discarded so many different scenes that I kind of knew her really well. So I didn't specifically know what was going to happen in that scene, but as I wrote it, I was like, yeah, this is the right thing. This is what it is.
How long do your characters live up here before they make it to the page?
Oh, a long time.
Yeah, like I'm like that too.
At least a year.
Nice.
At least a year. Yeah. it's very weird. And there's a lot that goes into, I've realized this over, like, I've been published for 10 years now, and I didn't know this as a debut author, but I've realized about my process that the thought ideas they spend a lot of time in my mind before I even pitch a story, before I write a chapter, before I do anything. There's a lot that's just spinning mentally. And of course, at the time I'm writing other projects, I'm finishing other projects, I'm editing other projects. Yeah. Yeah. And so it's
on the back burner.
They spend a lot of time. I even now, like, my next book is written and I'm pondering the book after that. Like, that's how far ahead mentally my brain is working.
Yeah, it sounds like we have really similar processes when it comes to the long gestation time for ideas and having the character yapping away in there for a bit before they actually make it to the page. I think that's so interesting. Let's see. Of my 85 questions, where would we like to turn next? It's a pick your own adventure situation. Let's see. We talked about ghosts. We talked about your process. Oh, I had a question when we were talking about what parts of the book surprised you. Right. So you had moments of inspiration while you were writing Shay. What about Beth? Were there parts of her that just like emerged fully formed? Because she seems like that kind of person. Did she just like pop onto the page like, hello, I'm here?
Yeah, she kind of did. There are a couple things that are a little, she comes across as this super bold, confident woman, but when Shay actually goes to the house and sees where Beth lives, and she's like, this is kind of screwed up. Like, her life is a bit weird, like deeply weird. And Beth doesn't really talk about this weird, like how weird it is. So Beth does have kind of layers to her that kind of come up. What she's like when she's home alone is different from what she projects to other people. But she was definitely a lot of fun to write. And the only real challenge with writing Beth was that because there's certain revelations that happen at specific times, it was like, when you're in her inner monologue, you can't have her be thinking about the wrong thing too early.
It's so true. It's so true. So did the idea, so for those who don't know yet, who haven't yet read, but will surely soon read after this conversation, the Book of Cold Cases, it has a dual timeline between 2017 and a few years in the past, like mostly in like the late 60s and then I think
the 70s. Yeah.
The 70s. So did the idea originate as a dual timeline?
Yeah.
All right. How did you deal with that when you were, I guess you said you revised a lot?
I did. And I mean, there was no question. I was like, if you're going to write a story that incorporates a 1970s serial killer, I as a reader want you to put me on the page in the 1970s when all this stuff is happening.
Y'all, impeccable.
Do not just write a book about someone in the present reading a true crime book going, that's interesting. No, go to the 70s and put it on the page. So, I mean, that's why I wanted to write it. I was like, I want to write in the 70s. So
the cars, the parties, the vibes, I loved it. It was eating it up.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons. I mean, the Sundown Motel has a 1982 timeline because I was like, damn, I'm going to 1982. I mean, I don't care if you want to go, I'm going. So that was so it was always a dual timeline. But aside from that, I mean, like, that is what the story calls for. Like I say, I mean, if you're going to have a character investigating something that happened 40 years ago, if you don't have a past timeline, then you're following someone around who's reading a lot of things and Googling things. That's not, I'm not, as a reader, I'm not watching someone Google. So
reading Shay research was so fascinating. How did you do that?
I did, because I did it in small doses. It's not the whole book. If it was 100 pages, you'd be bored out of your mind. Yeah. I had to show Shay researching something. I mean, she does something, but I did it like these little bits and pieces that she fills in the blanks, the stuff that Beth is not telling her, and she has to go find herself. So, but I did not just write the whole book like that. So that was it is based on, it's not just based on me wanting to write about 70s clothes. It's based on what the story kind of needs.
And 70s sexism, my God.
Yeah, it's fun. Good
Yeah,
times.
I think yeah. I did have a question about see, we have like 5-ish minutes left before we summon John from
Wherever he is.
wherever he is in
Wherever
the
he went.
vast unknown of the internet. But we've been talking a lot about like your very empowered female characters and how they're bold, and a lot about true crime. And I'm curious about how you see the relationship between, because when we talk about people being obsessed with true crime, a lot of the time we talk about women being obsessed with true crime. And I'm curious about your thoughts on the relationship between those two things. Why do you think women are so drawn to true crime? Why is it then, I mean, we know why it's then like kind of like looked down upon a little bit to be so obsessed with it, because anything that women like gets looked down upon sometimes. But I'm curious about how you see the relationship between women and true crime, and how, because we see it like very powerfully in this book.
I think that true crime is a way for women to process the world we live in our own experiences. And I'm not even only talking about like direct experiences of violence, but like just our own experiences being women in the world. And it's a way that we process that without actually having to talk about ourselves or what things that have happened to us, or things that could have happened to us, or things that we worry about happening to our daughters, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So it's a way for us to kind of process things. It's you know, it's like I had a character in the Sundown Motel who said, I'm an expert in murder because it could always be me. So that's sort of how we feel about it. It's like, well, you know, any of this could be me. A lot of the times you're reading stuff, you're like, well, that could have been me. Or if you're reading about something that happened to a young woman, you're like, that could have been me when I was 20, could have been me. So there's a lot of that where we're trying to sort of process the world we live in. And when women talk true crime amongst ourselves, it's also how we're sort of processing with the women we know or the women we talk to. And I think that's a big part of it. And, you know, and it can go too far when you're too into true crime. Like there's a lot of, you're going to read very, very horrifying and disturbing things, and that's not always good for your mental health. So there's a bit of a line you have to follow where it's like, I don't read true crime all the time. That's not a steady diet of the only thing. It's not the only type of podcast I listen to, the type of book I read. It's one kind that I read when I'm in the mood and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then if I get too far into it, I'm like, I got to back out. So I think that that's sort of why women are drawn to it. And, you know, it's not new. Like Anne Rule, our moms read Anne Rule. Anne Rule was a New York Times bestseller with The Stranger Beside Me. And like, it was in the 80s. She wrote that book while Ted Bundy was still alive. Like that was the early 80s that she wrote that book. So, I mean, that was our moms reading that book. Someone was buying that book, and that was our moms and our grandmas and our aunts. So it's been around for a while.
Do you think we have time for one more question, or should we summon John to get into the Q&A? Because I'm pretty sure that people will have as many questions for you as I have had.
Up to you.
All right.
Oh wait, John's telling us to do one more.
Time for one more. All right.
We'll be quick.
We will be quick. So this question is kind of going to expose me a little bit. Though I write horror, I find writing spooky scenes, reading spooky books, and watching spooky movies scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
How do you approach writing the spooky scenes? Because there are some hair-raising scenes in this book. Be prepared, guys. How do you do it? What's it like?
I cannot watch horror movies. I mean, I can watch spooky movies. I can watch certain things. Straight up horror, I can't. It's too much for me. I'm scared of everything. I'm scared of everything. That's why I write scary stuff. Is because I read what scares me.
I'm scared of the dark.
I'm terrified of the dark. those scenes, to write the spooky scenes, I mean, it isn't super scary when you're writing it because you've got all these other processes going on. You're thinking about even down to like sentence structure and grammar and characterization and how is this going. But it does, the spooky scenes are fun because those are the scenes where there's like, you're not plotting. It's just you're in the scene and you're just got imagery in your head and you just get to run with that imagery. So in order to do that, you do have to go into a kind of a dark place to write those scenes. And so I don't write them, I don't write that every day. That's not something I write every day, but I can kind of get in the mode and get into it. And actually, the first draft of the spooky scene is pretty good, but I go back a few months later when I can go back into it and like just really dig into that mood and that mindset and make it even scarier. So it requires a bit of a mental effort to do, and you can't do it all the time every day. And that's why I can't read it all the time every day either. So you have to be ready to do it.
No, I absolutely feel the same. My husband makes so much fun of me because like my nightstand is like some horror novels, fantasy, and then just like this massive stack of romance novels.
I read tons of romance novels.
You need the balance. Yeah. And in times of high anxiety, like I just finished writing my PhD dissertation, like we need the romance to balance out the darker stuff that I then have to like go back and revise and thinky thoughts about,
Yeah. I'm a huge romance fan. I love it. That's why there's a romance in every one of my books. There always is.
No spoilers, but I really enjoyed the touch of romance in here. I thought it was incredibly satisfying. I thought it was warm and genuine. I thought
it's because I don't want my book to be just unrelentingly bleak. Like it's the same as like I don't want my reading schedule to be unrelentingly bleak. I want the book to have scary parts, but the bleakness gets broken up a bit. And it does. For me, it's like you've got a book, you've got all this great stuff in this book, and it's like, why would you not put a super handsome guy in? Like, why would you not do that? Like, that just seems so obvious to me.
No spoilers, but when we saw him, I was like, yeah, get it, Shay. I love this. I love all of this.
Why doesn't everybody do this in every book? I just don't get it. But I'll do it in all of mine.
It's delightful, and I will keep reading you as long as you are writing books. Are you allowed to tell us anything about your next novel? Or do you want to keep chatting about this one?
Yeah, it is written. We have a title, but I haven't been officially given the go-ahead to say the title. I will say this next one is a single timeline because that's just what the story called for. It is a ghost story, and it's about a couple that takes a wrong turn and picks up the wrong hitchhiker on the wrong road, and things go very wrong. That's what it's about.
I already can't wait. Oh my gosh. All right. John, do you think it's time for some Q&A now?
Yeah. So I also wanted to say that, like, you've been talking about like how Simone writes these great creepy scenes. Like, I still think about the ghost from the Sundown Motel with all of the hotel doors just like slamming, like when the ghost would appear. Like, I still think about that like all the time. It's so creepy.
I still get readers messaging me about the ice machine, and they're like, I can't go to I can't use the ice machine at a hotel ever again. Like, sorry.
So before we get into reader questions, which we've got some good ones, Isabel, you have been so great to lead this discussion tonight. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your book, The Hacienda, which comes out on May 3rd?
Yeah, The Hacienda is billed as Mexican Gothic meets Rebecca, set in Mexico in 1823, which is right after the end of Mexico's War of Independence from Spain. And it's about a young woman named Beatriz who is financially in dire straits because of how the war wrapped up and different transitions of power happened. And she needs, basically because it's 1823, she thinks, how am I going to get myself and my mother out of this terrible situation? Aha, there's this handsome widower. Let's do it. Said handsome widower has an estate in the country called Hacienda San Isidro. And she goes there after she marries him for his money and his estate and discovers that it is immensely haunted, horrifically haunted. And like Simone's book, these ghosts are quite real, and nobody seems to believe Beatriz, although there are people on the Hacienda who are quite acting pretty dodgy and, not answering her questions. So she goes to town to ask for the help of priests to exorcise her home. They refuse, except for one, a young man named Padre Andres, who has some secrets of his own. So it's a book with haunted houses, witchcraft, and it kind of delves into the deep, dark side of Mexico's colonial history. So.
And there is, I've got my copy. There's a copy of the cover. So guys, that comes out May 3rd. So you can visit the event page that we created, and it's up there to pre-order. That was a fantastic. Yeah. That was a perfect elevator pitch.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. So Simone,
I'll rewatch this recording and write down what I said.
So Simone, with the last 3 books that you've done, you've moved up considerably timeline-wise. You were doing these really great interwar books. What made you want to move a little bit more contemporary with the stories?
I just, I wrote 5 books set in 1920s England, and I loved that time period. But after 5 books, I just kind of felt like I had explored everything I wanted to and done everything I wanted to do, and I just wanted to try other things and be creatively move around. And that was really all it was. I remember I was writing Lost Among the Living, which was my last 1920s book, and I said to my editor, I should probably change things up, and she said, yeah, you could change things up, but I really want this book. And I was like, oh, I want to write this book. I love Lost Among the Living. It's one of my favorite books that I've written. So I was like, okay, I'm going to write this book. And we were both like, yeah, write that book. So I turned it in, and I was like, okay, I should change it up. And she just said, pitch me something. She's like, pitch me something that is a Simone St. James book. That's maybe you've changed something up to make things more interesting for yourself, but it's a Simone St. James book. And I said, well, how about a haunted girls boarding school? And she was like, how fast can you write that book? So, so it was just kind of, I just sort of tossed the ideas. I was like, I really want to write about a haunted girls boarding school. And she was like, I want to read about that haunted girls boarding school. So get on it. So I did. And it just sort of went from there. That's how it kind of goes in this business, is you're just going from book to book going, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea? Okay, so no, that's not a good idea. This is a good idea. So that's kind of just how I went about it. But it was just mostly, I did 5 books in that setting, and I just sort of wanted to explore.
So Deborah Jo wants to know, she says, your books are part of the reason why she loves dual timelines. How do you keep your timeline straight when you're writing?
Oh man, that is hard. I will say one thing. I write, people do it differently, but I don't just write one timeline and then separately write the other timeline and then sort of glue them. I write it from beginning to end. So I'm writing back and forth, each chapter back and forth. So I do write it sequentially, so the chapters sequentially. And so I have to make a lot of notes as I go. I have a spiral notebook. It's behind me there. I have a spiral notebook, and I write things down. I kind of give myself a lot of license as I'm drafting to just be like, this is probably wrong, I'll fix it later. But then I go through, there's a lot of scribbled notes in a notebook. And when I get toward the end, I actually make weird little maps of the story where I've got plot points and arrows in between them. And it's really complicated, and I'm still not sure I got it right. So yeah, it is crazy hard to do. So it takes a lot of work, and then my editor at some point goes through it and goes, make sure that I've got everything right. And then a copy editor goes through it and is like, this doesn't seem, it takes a lot.
And you discover all the continuity errors that you've made, and you're like, oh no.
Yeah. And it's even with the book of cold cases, like Beth's life, what year did this happen? What year did that happen? What year did her mom die? What year did I had it all written down, and I thought I had it right. And they were still like, that's not what you said at the beginning of the book. So there's a lot.
So Isabel, I'm going to turn one of your questions on you. Simone told us whether or not she believes in ghosts. How about you? Do you believe in ghosts?
It's a loaded question. So when I was like, I think about 5 years old, my family moved into a house in the northern suburbs of Chicago that was built in the 1920s that had some vibes. The house had some attitude problems. And when I was, mouthy or naughty, my dad would put me in the timeout corner, which was on the basement stairs. And if I was very bad, it would be the bottom of the basement stairs.
Oh, no.
Traumatic. And
No.
so
creepy timeout corner, haunted timeout
corner. So I would sit down there staring. There was a furnace room and then a storage room. And then it was kind of an unfinished basement and it had all these pipes. It was very dark, very cobwebby. So I had to sit down there, think about what I did. Of course I didn't. I was thinking about what the hell is down here. The feeling of it was just immense. Anyway, my aunt, who loves true crime, also believes this house was haunted. So I stand by the fact that this house was totally haunted. And ever since then, I've never seen a ghost. I am a pragmatic person. In other areas of my life, I'm not super superstitious, said the horror writer. It's about ghosts. So take that with a grain of salt. But so I would say probably yes. Do I want to believe in ghosts? Absolutely not. I think they're spooky. I'm currently at my aunt's place in Colorado and I have to sleep in this room in the basement and I'm not sleeping very well because it's very dark. Yeah. I think things are cool over here, but I'm like, this room is dark. I don't love it.
Yeah,
so,
ghosts actually scare me. So that's why I write, I figure what scares me will scare other people. But the idea of seeing a ghost, is I would run so bloody fast, it would not.
Exactly. And so if you lean into that, it becomes authentic on the page.
Yeah.
The problem is leaning into it gives me the heebie-jeebies. And then I was writing parts of my book while my husband was on a work trip and I had to sleep with the lights on because I am a massive weenie. I, the horror writer, am a massive wuss. Yeah. So I guess, yes, I believe in ghosts, but do I want to? No.
Fair. That's a fair answer. So we've had a couple of people want to know, Simone, who would you recommend if somebody's read all of your books, but they want something else that's good and suspenseful and ghosty? Who would you recommend?
Well, the Hacienda is excellent, but it's not out yet. Yeah, this is the trick question because I write the books I'm trying to find as a reader and I can't find them. Yeah. I really wish there was a dozen answers to this because then I wouldn't have to write books. I would just read them. Yeah. I would be like, great, you guys do it. I just want to read books. Yeah. Gosh, what have I read lately?
And that's one of the things that I love about Simone's books is Simone, like you said, you were right. You started kind of this you were writing Gothics when everybody had pretty much abandoned it. And it was so great to find those books because I love them too. And it was so great to see, and now we have a lot of people doing kind of contemporary versions of them, but it was really great to see you kind of writing those old school Gothics, when just nobody was yet.
Yeah. And the Gothic is something, it's a funny genre because everyone keeps saying it's dead and it never quite dies. Actually, that sounds kind of creepy, doesn't it? So it's, but it never quite goes away. And there's always a few of us who really love them, but there's never enough of us to make it a mega hit. Unless you get, the 13th Tale was kind of a Gothic and that was a big hit book. That was a long time ago now. Mm-hmm. Go read the 13th Tale, I guess. The book's really good. But I don't know. There's not a lot lately that I've read that has really hit that note for me.
Yeah. There's a really great book. I just dropped a link to it in the chat for anybody who's watching. That's called The Woman in the Mirror by Rebecca James that came out last year. That's a really great, governess taking care of creepy children, wolves howling on the moors. It's really great. And I would also recommend for people that want something that's suspenseful like Simone's, except there's always going to be a rational explanation. I think you and Riley Sager kind of play with a lot of the same stuff, except with him, there's always a rational explanation where you're like, no, it's ghosts. So I think if anybody likes your stuff, they should definitely check out Riley's if they don't know.
They should, yeah. I'll be cruel and say that I've read his next one, which is called The House Across the Lake, and it is fantastic. If you love Riley Sager, you're gonna love it. But stuff that's not books. I mean, one of the things that really grabbed me over the last couple of years was the Haunting of Hill House series on Netflix.
Yeah.
I've watched it twice. It's extremely good. It does hit that vibe. And Mike Flanagan also made The Haunting of Bly Manor, and he made Midnight Mass, which just came out last year, which is not specifically ghosts. But those are very, very good. They're not, well, The Haunting of Hill House is quite gothic. They're very, very good, meaty stories with great characterization, great scary scenes. I love all three of those series.
So we've talked about kind of similar real likes. So my disclaimer is you can't say each other's books because we have established that we're all fans of everyone. We'll start with Isabel this time. What is something that you've read lately that you've loved?
Well, since I can't say Simone's, you've made this difficult for me. As I mentioned earlier, I've been really stressed lately, so I've been reaching for a lot of romance.
Yeah.
A ton of romance. And I really love Emily Henry. I was lucky enough to get an arc of her book, Book Lovers, that comes out on May 3rd. It is her best yet. It had me laughing out loud. I cried. It was brilliant. But Be Treed is also really, really good. In terms of books that might be a little more in the line of like be expected for people who are coming to see Simone St. James chat, I really love The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I read it. When did I read it? A few months ago now. But if you like Gothic, if you like mysteries, if you like that with a dash of a little bit of fantasy, if you liked all of the really dark parts of the new reboot of Sabrina, the Witch, what is it called? The Incredible and Something Adventures of Sabrina. Mm-hmm. This book is for you because the aesthetic, impeccable. The character development, really intense. If you have religious trauma, you may also really enjoy the themes that it explores, but it is dark, it is gothic, it is dripping with atmosphere. The Year of the Witching.
And how about you, Simone? What's something that you've read lately that you loved?
Let's see. Non-thriller-ish. The book that I loved so much in the past couple of months, I only read it in the past couple of months, is The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. Mm-hmm. Kate Quinn writes historical fiction. She has never let me down. She is absolutely top of her game, historical fiction. The Rose Code is about the Bletchley Park code breakers in World War II, just spectacularly done. And thriller-wise, I read a book called A Flicker in the Dark by Stacey Willingham, and that came out just in January, and that was her debut, and I think it hit all the bestseller lists, which is a pretty big deal. So I read it. It was really good. It's about a woman who's several decades ago, her father went to prison as a serial killer, and she's had to live with that. And then she's in the present, and some stuff is happening, and so I'm not going to give any spoilers away. So just you have to go into it a bit blind. But so it's a really good serial killer thriller. It doesn't have supernatural in it, but I thought it was really well done and really, a really good, exciting book for sure.
Awesome. So for those watching, I've been dropping links for those in the comments if anybody wants to check any of those out. And Valencia and several other people said for those of you who are looking for Simone St. James read-alikes, you should also check out Jennifer McMahon, specifically The Drowning Kind and The Winter People, which I know my coworker Sally is also a big fan of. So if you guys are looking,
she is fantastic. She has a new book coming in a month or two. She has a new release coming. So yeah, she's an amazing writer.
Awesome. So I think that is going to about do it for us for this evening. So I want to recap for anybody. I saw a couple people mention that they had tuned in late. So if you missed the first part of the chat, once we are done, Facebook and YouTube will archive it. So it'll be up so you'll be able to rewatch. And while you're there, you can also check out all of the other virtual events that we have been doing since the pandemic started. There's a great wealth of content out there. So for those of you who might have tuned in late, we've been chatting with Simone St. James, whose book, The Book of Cold Cases, just came out today. We have signed book plates to go with our copies. movies. It's fantastic. Both me and my coworker Sally have read it, and my coworker Rebecca has been eagerly waiting for the galley next. She's next on the list to get to it. And we have been chatting with Isabel Cañas, whose book, The Hacienda, which I'm so excited, I can't wait to get to, comes out on May 3rd. So you can pre-order that from Murder by the Book as well. Isabel and Simone, thank you so much for chatting with us this evening. This has been fantastic.
Thank you, John. The next book I'll hopefully actually be in Houston. That would be exciting.
Yes. Yeah, we will keep our fingers crossed.
Like, yes, I want to go to bookstores in person.
Oh, it's so fun. You'll love it.
Yeah. So Simone, again, congratulations on Book of Cold Cases, and Isabel, early congratulations for the Hacienda. Like I said, we're super excited about it. So you guys have a great night, and we will see you soon.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.